I always believed that marriage meant building one dream together. When Victoria and I got married, we didn't have money. We didn't have connections. We didn't even know what our future would look like. All we had was hope. Every night, we sat together inside our tiny apartment with notebooks spread across our old table. We counted every dollar we had and planned the company we wanted to build. Victoria would smile at me and say, "Asterisk, one day, people will remember our company." Asterisk. I always smiled back and answered, "Asterisk, we'll build it together." Asterisk. Back then, I never imagined those simple words would become the promise that guided my entire life. As the years passed, our dreams slowly became reality. Our company started growing. One client became 10. 10 became 100. Every small success felt like another brick in the future we were building together. Victoria naturally became the public face of the business. She was confident. She spoke beautifully. People admired her. Whenever she walked onto a stage, everyone listened. Reporters surrounded her. Investors wanted photographs with her. Newspapers called her a genius. Television interviews praised her leadership. Watching all of that made me proud, because every time she smiled, I felt like I was smiling too. I never wanted attention. I never cared whose name appeared in the headlines. To me, our success was shared success. While Victoria stood under bright lights, I stayed behind the scenes. After everyone went home, I stayed inside the office. I solved problems before they became disasters. I rewrote business plans. I prepared investor presentations. Ikalmat narbosh clients. When projects failed, I stayed until sunrise finding solutions. I never complained. I believed this was what real partnership looked like. I thought love meant helping the person beside you shine. And honestly, I was happy doing exactly. The harder our company grew, the less anyone noticed me. That never bothered me. I wasn't building the company for applause. I was building it for us. Every morning, I arrived before sunrise. Every night, I was the last person to leave. When investors asked difficult questions, I prepared every answer before Victoria walked into the meeting. When an important client threatened to cancel a contract, I stayed awake all night creating a recovery plan. The next morning, Victoria presented it with confidence. The client smiled. The contract was saved. Everyone congratulated her. I simply returned to my office and started solving the next problem. That became my life. Every crisis passed through my hands before anyone else even knew it existed. Sometimes I looked around the empty office late at night and quietly laughed to myself. I would whisper, "Asterisk, tomorrow will be another busy day." Asterisk. One evening, while I was still working, my office door slowly opened. Victoria walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She placed one beside my laptop and smiled. "Asterisk, you're still working?" Asterisk, she asked. I looked at the clock and laughed. Asterisk, someone has to fix tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. Asterisk, she stepped closer, gently kissed my forehead, and whispered, "Asterisk, I couldn't do any of this without you." Asterisk, those simple words meant more to me than any award ever could. In that moment, I felt seen. I felt appreciated. I believed nothing could ever come between us. I looked at her and smiled. "We're almost there," I said. She nodded. Asterisk, we're building something special. Asterisk, I truly believed we were. I had no idea that while our company was becoming stronger, our marriage was quietly becoming weaker. Success changed everything. At first, the changes were so small that I barely noticed them. Victoria started receiving invitations to private dinners with famous CEOs. Luxury cars waited outside. Oh, that never bothered me. I wasn't building the company for applause. I was building it for us. Every morning, I arrived before sunrise. Every night, I was the last person to leave. When investors asked difficult questions, I prepared every answer before Victoria walked into the meeting. When an important client threatened to cancel a contract, I stayed awake all night creating a recovery plan. The next morning, Victoria presented it with confidence. The client smiled. The contract was saved. Everyone congratulated her. I simply returned to my office and started solving the next problem. That became my life. Every crisis passed through my hands before anyone else even knew existed. Sometimes I looked around the empty office late at night and quietly laugh to myself. I would whisper, asterisk, tomorrow will be another busy day. Asterisk. One evening, while I was still working, my office door slowly opened. Victoria walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She placed one beside my laptop and smiled. Asterisk, you're still working? Asterisk, she asked. I looked at the clock and laughed. Asterisk, someone has to fix tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. Asterisk, she stepped closer, gently kissed my forehead, and whispered. Asterisk, I couldn't do any of this without you. Asterisk, those simple words meant more to me than any award ever could. In that moment, I felt seen. I felt appreciated. I believed nothing could ever come between us. I looked at her and smiled. We're almost there, I said. She nodded. Asterisk, we're building something special. Asterisk, I truly believed we were. I had no idea that while our company was becoming stronger, our marriage was quietly becoming weaker. A few weeks later, I attended an important meeting with Victoria and several new investors. The room was filled with confident smiles, expensive suits, and conversations about growth. I stood quietly beside Victoria, reviewing the final business notes in my hand. One of the investors walked over with a friendly smile. Asterisk, Victoria, aren't you going to introduce us? Asterisk, he asked. She smiled back. Asterisk, of course. Asterisk. Then she looked at me. Asterisk, this is Ethan, my husband. Asterisk. For a brief second, I smiled. But then she added, asterisk, he doesn't really work in the business. Asterisk. The room became strangely quiet. The investor simply nodded and reached out to shake my hand. Nice to meet you, he said politely. Nice to meet you too, I replied. That was all. No one knew that almost every strategy discussed in that room had started on my desk. No one knew I had spent countless sleepless nights saving projects that should have failed. No one knew I had written the plans that built the company standing before them. And I said nothing. I didn't correct her. I didn't defend myself. I simply smiled. Because I loved her. On the drive home, silence filled the car. I looked out the window as city lights passed by. Inside, my heart felt heavier than ever before. I kept asking myself the same question. Asterisk. When did I stop being her partner? Asterisk. That night, I stood alone in my office. The lights from the city shined through the window. But deep inside, something had already begun to break. An IS. A few days later, my younger sister Emma came to visit me. She walked into my office and stopped the moment she saw the piles of files covering my desk. She looked at me with concern. Asterisk, Ethan, have you been here all weekend? Asterisk. I gave her a tired smile. Asterisk, Victoria has important meetings. Someone has to keep everything running. Asterisk. Emma slowly crossed her arms. Asterisk. And who takes care of you? Asterisk. I forced a small laugh. Asterisco, I'm fine. Asterisk. She didn't smile back. Instead, she looked straight into my eyes. Asterisk, no, you're not. Asterisk. The room fell silent. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly asked, asterisk, when was the last time Victoria thanked you? Asterisk. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I honestly couldn't remember. Emma sighed. Asterisk, I know you love her. Asterisk. Ido I answered. She stepped closer. Asterisk. But love should never make you invisible. Asterisk. Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. After she left, I sat alone in my office, thinking about everything she had said. That evening, I turned on the television. Victoria was standing on a beautiful stage, holding another business award. The audience stood and applauded. She smiled brightly. First, I'd like to thank our investors. The crowd clapped. I'd also like to thank my incredible management team. More applause filled the room. Asterisk, and finally, thank you to everyone who believed in this company. Asterisk. I waited. I kept waiting. But my name never came. I slowly turned off the television. The room became completely silent. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about the company. I wasn't thinking about success. I was thinking about myself. I whispered into the darkness. Asterisk. When did I disappear from my own life? Asterisk. Even then, I refused to believe my marriage was falling apart. I still believed love could survive silence. I had no idea. The day that would change my life forever was already coming. The music was loud. Bright lights filled the ballroom. People laughed, raised their glasses, and celebrated another record-breaking year for our company. Everywhere I looked, cameras flashed. Executives shook hands. Investors smiled proudly. It was supposed to be the happiest night of our lives. I stood near the stage, quietly watching everything. An executive walked over and smiled. "Congratulations, Ethan. Your wife is incredible." I smiled politely. "She worked very hard." He nodded, shook my hand, and disappeared into the crowd. I looked across the ballroom. Victoria was talking with several investors. She looked confident, powerful, successful. For a moment, I felt proud. This was the dream we had built together. Then, she looked directly at me. There was no smile on her face. She slowly walked toward me. When she stopped in front of me, her voice was calm, almost cold. "Ethan, come with me." I frowned. "Is everything okay?" She didn't answer. "I need to talk to you." Something inside me suddenly felt wrong. I quietly followed her through the crowded ballroom. The music became softer with every step. People continued celebrating behind us. No one noticed us leaving. Victoria opened the door to a private meeting room. I walked inside. She closed the door behind us. The sound of the party disappeared. Only silence remained. I looked at her. "Victoria, what's going on?" She folded her arms and took a slow breath. For several seconds, she said nothing. I could hear my own heartbeat. Finally, she looked in my eyes. "No, everything is not okay." My chest tightened. I tried to smile. "Then tell me what's wrong. We'll fix it together, like we always do." She lowered her eyes for a moment. Then she whispered the words that made my heart sink. "I've been thinking about this for a long time." Inspirational. I looked at Victoria, trying to understand the fear growing inside my chest. She stayed silent for a few seconds. Then she looked straight into my eyes. "I've been thinking about us." I smiled nervously. "About us? What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "Ethan, you've become someone I can't grow with anymore." For a moment, I thought I had heard her wrong. "I don't understand." She slowly walked toward the window and looked at the city lights below. Without turning around, she said, "You're a good man." She paused. "But being good isn't enough anymore." My heartbeat became faster. "Victoria, what are you trying to say?" She finally faced me. Her eyes showed no emotion. "I've outgrown this marriage." Those words hit me harder than anything I'd ever heard. I shook my head. "No, that's impossible. We built this company together. We built this life together." She looked at me calmly. Then she quietly said, "No." I frowned. "What do you mean, no?" She folded her arms. "I built this company." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. I whispered, "We built it." She slowly shook her head. "People don't see you anymore. They see me. They expect me to stand beside people who match my success." My chest felt tight. I could barely breathe. I looked into her eyes and asked the question I never thought I would have to ask. "Then, what am I to you?" She answered without hesitation. "You're holding me back." The room became completely silent. I searched her face, hoping she would tell me this was a terrible joke. She didn't. I whispered, "Is this really how you see me?" She nodded once. "Yes." My voice trembled. "I gave up everything for us." She looked away. Then she quietly said the words that completely shatter my heart. "Zvizditsa, zvizditsa ine." The room was completely silent. I could barely breathe. Before I could say another word, the door slowly opened. Ryan walked inside. He looked calm, comfortable, almost as if he already belonged there. He glanced at me, then looked at Victoria. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. Victoria didn't seem surprised to see him. She simply shook her head. "No, it's fine." That was the moment everything became clear. I looked at Ryan, then back at Victoria. A painful question escaped my lips. "How long has this been going on?" Ryan gave a small shrug. "I don't think that's important anymore." I let out a bitter laugh. "It matters to me." Victoria stepped forward. "Ethan, stop." I looked directly into her eyes. "No, I deserve the truth." She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there was no hesitation. "I've already made my decision." She reached into her handbag. Then she placed a thick envelope on the table between us. My hand started shaking. Slowly, I opened it. Inside were divorce papers. Every page was already prepared. Every signature line was waiting for mine. I looked at the date. They had been completed weeks before tonight, while I was still fighting for our marriage. She had already planned its ending. I stared at her in disbelief. You decided all of this without even talking to me? She answered quietly. There was nothing left to discuss. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You didn't even give me a chance. She looked at me without emotion. I don't want another chance. The room suddenly felt colder than ever. Victoria watched me carefully. Ryan remained silent. Both of them expected the same thing. They expected me to beg. They expected me to fight. They expected me to promise I would change. Instead, I slowly picked up the pen. Victor. The room was completely silent. I could barely breathe. Before I could say another word, the door slowly opened. Ryan walked inside. He looked calm, comfortable, almost as if he already belonged there. He glanced at me, then looked at Victoria. Am I interrupting? He asked. Victoria didn't seem surprised to see him. She simply shook her head. No, it's fine. That was the moment everything became clear. I looked at Ryan, then back at Victoria. A painful question escaped my lips. How long has this been going on? Ryan gave a small shrug. I don't think that's important anymore. I let out a bitter laugh. It matters to me. Victoria stepped forward. Ethan, stop. I looked directly into her eyes. No, I deserve the truth. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there was no hesitation. I've already made my decision. She reached into her handbag. Then she placed a thick envelope on the table between us. My hand started shaking. Slowly, I opened it. Inside were divorce papers. Every page was already prepared. Every signature line was waiting for mine. I looked at the date. They had been completed weeks before tonight, while I was still fighting for our marriage. She had already planned its ending. I stared at her in disbelief. You decided all of this without even talking to me? She answered quietly. There was nothing left to discuss. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You didn't even give me a chance. She looked at me without emotion. I don't want another chance. The room suddenly felt colder than ever. Victoria watched me carefully. Ryan remained silent. Both of them expected the same thing. They expected me to beg. They expected me to fight. They expected me to promise I would change. Instead, I slowly picked up the pen. Victor. I woke up expecting to feel empty again. Instead, I felt quiet. Not happy. Not healed. Just quiet. For a few moments, I stared at the ceiling. Everything that had happened still felt unreal. My marriage was over. The home I had built was gone. The future I believed in had disappeared. Then I heard a gentle knock on the bedroom door. Ethan, are you awake? It was Emma. Yeah, I answered softly. The door opened. She walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. A warm smile crossed her face. Good morning. I forced a small smile. Morning. She handed me one of the cups and sat beside me. How did you sleep? I looked down at the coffee. Then I laughed quietly. Honestly, I don't think I slept at all. Emma nodded. She wasn't surprised. After a moment, she said, You don't have to pretend with me. I sighed. I'm trying not to think about Victoria. Emma gently shook her head. You don't have to stop thinking about her. I looked at her. She continued softly. You just have to stop believing your life ended because she walked away. Those words stayed in my mind. I stared into my coffee. I gave her everything. Emma nodded. I know. I gave up my career. I know. My voice became quieter. I believed in her, even after she stopped believing in me. Emma placed her hand on my shoulder. She smiled gently. Then maybe it's time you started believing in yourself. I looked at her without saying a word. For the first time, I wondered if she might actually be right. Just then, my phone suddenly S. I stared at my phone. Daniel Hayes. I hadn't seen that name in years. For a second, I wondered if I should answer. Then I took a deep breath and picked up the call. Daniel? A familiar laugh came through the speaker. I was wondering if you'd finally answer. I smiled for the first time that morning. It's been a long time. He laughed again. Too long. I leaned back in my chair. How did you even get my number? Before Daniel could answer, I looked at Emma. She smiled innocently. Daniel chuckled. Your sister helped me. I shook my head and laughed. I should have guessed. His voice became calm. Ethan, I heard about the divorce. The smile disappeared from my face. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then I quietly asked, Did Emma tell you everything? She told me enough. I sighed. I'm not looking for sympathy. Daniel answered immediately. Good, because I'm not calling to feel sorry for you. That surprised me. Then why are you calling? His voice became confident. Because I remember the guy who destroyed everyone in our business strategy class. I laughed. A real laugh. Something I hadn't done in days. Daniel, that was years ago. So what? I'm not that person anymore. Without hesitation, he replied. I disagree. I frowned. He continued. I don't think that man disappeared. I think you've spent years hiding him. His words hit me harder than I expected. Nobody had believed in me for a very long time. But somehow, Daniel still did. And I couldn't stop wondering, what if he was right? I stayed silent for a moment. Daniel's words echoed inside my mind. I think you've spent years hiding the person you really are. I took a slow breath. So why did you call me? Daniel didn't hesitate. Because I started a technology company. We've grown faster than anyone expected. But we've reached a point where we need someone who knows how to solve impossible problems. I smiled faintly. There are thousands of business consultants. Daniel laughed. I'm not looking for a consultant. He paused for a second. Then he said something I never expected. I'm looking for you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. After everything that had happened, someone still believed in me. I finally asked, you really think I can help? His answer came immediately. I don't think it. I know it. I closed my eyes. Those 4 words carried more faith than I've felt in years. Then Daniel asked, when can you come in? I looked out the window. For the first time since the divorce, I felt a small spark of hope. Tomorrow morning. He smiled through the phone. Perfect. The next morning, I stood outside a tall glass office building. I adjusted my tie, took one deep breath, and walked inside. Everything felt different. Different company, different future, different life. The receptionist smiled. Good morning. You must be Ethan. I nodded. Daniel is expecting you. A few moments later, Daniel walked toward me with a wide smile. Without saying a word, he pulled me into a quick hug. It's good to see you again, my friend. I smiled. For the first time in a long while. It felt good to hear someone say they were happy to see me. Little did I know, walking into that building wasn't just the start of a new job. It was the beginning of rebuilding the man I used to be. Daniel smiled and placed a hand on my shoulder. Come on, he said. There's someone I want you to meet. I followed him through the office. The atmosphere felt different. People were focused, busy, but there was also energy, the kind of energy that comes from people building something they truly believe in. Daniel opened the conference room door. A young woman was already waiting inside. She stood up as we entered. Ethan, Daniel said, this is Sophia Bennett, our operations director. She smiled warmly and offered her hand. I've heard a lot about you. I shook her hand and smiled. I hope only good things. She laughed softly. Actually, I've heard you're the man who solves impossible problems. I looked at Daniel. He couldn't stop smiling. See, he said. I told you he wouldn't admit it. The 3 of us sat down. Daniel slid a thick file across the table. This is our biggest client, he explained. They're thinking about ending their contract. Sophia looked at me. We've tried everything. If you were in charge, what would you do? I opened the file. Instead of speaking immediately, I read every page carefully. The room stayed completely quiet. After a few minutes, I closed the file and looked at both of them. The problem isn't the client. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Then what is it? I leaned forward. They're not asking for cheaper prices. They're asking for confidence. Sophia looked surprised. Go on. For the first time in years, people weren't interrupting me. They were listening. And somehow, that felt even more valuable than being right. Sophia leaned forward with genuine interest. So what would you do? She asked. I looked at both of them before answering. First, we stop apologizing. Daniel nodded. I continued. The client has already heard enough excuses. Now, they need to see confidence. Sophia picked up a pen. Keep going. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, someone actually wanted to hear my ideas. We prepare a clear recovery plan. We give them realistic deadlines. We stop making promises we can't keep. Daniel crossed his arms with a smile. And then we let the client speak. Sophia looked surprised. Before we defend ourselves? I nodded. Exactly. People trust you more when they feel heard. The room became quiet. Daniel looked at Sophia. Sophia looked back at Daniel. Then both of them smiled. Daniel laughed. I knew it. This is exactly why I wanted you here. Sophia closed the file. Honestly, this is the first solution that actually makes sense. I couldn't remember the last time someone had said that to me. Nobody interrupted me. Nobody ignored me. Nobody treated me like I was invisible. When the meeting ended, Sophia walked with me to the door. She smiled warmly. I hope this isn't your last visit. I smiled back. I don't think it will be. As I walked out of the building, something inside me felt different. The pain was still there, but so was hope. For the first time since my divorce, I believed I still had a future. I didn't know it yet, but while I was rebuilding my life, Victoria was celebrating her new partnership with Ryan. She believed she had chosen the stronger future. She had no idea. The first cracks in her perfect world had already begun to appear. 3 months passed faster than I expected. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was living. Every morning, I walked into the office with purpose. Every evening, I went home knowing my work mattered. One afternoon, Daniel suddenly walked into my office with a huge smile on his face. He was holding a report in his hand. Ethan, you need to see this. I looked up from my laptop. What happened? Without saying another word, he placed the report on my desk. I opened it. My eyes immediately landed on the numbers. I looked back at him. We signed another international client. Daniel nodded excitedly. Not just that. He pointed to another page. Our revenue has doubled. For a moment, I simply stared at the report. Then I smiled. That's incredible. Daniel folded his arms and laughed. You know why this happened? I shook my head. Because you built an amazing company. He immediately corrected me. No, he smiled. We built an amazing company. I froze. That one word, we. I hadn't heard it in a very long time. Not since my marriage fell apart. For a moment, I couldn't even answer. Daniel noticed my silence. He smiled again. You're part of this, Ethan. Never forget that. I nodded slowly. Those simple words meant more than any award. 4 years, I had been invisible. Now, someone finally saw me again. And without realizing it, I had started believing in myself once more. A gentle knock came from my office door. Come in, I said. The door opened. Sophia walked in carrying another folder. She smiled as she placed it on my desk. I have something you'll want to see. I looked at the folder and smiled. Let me guess, more investor requests. She nodded. A lot more. I opened the folder. Meeting requests. Partnership offers. Private invitations. I looked up at her. These are all for Daniel, right? Sophia laughed softly. She slowly shook her head. No, they're asking for you. I blinked in surprise. Me? Daniel walked into the office just in time to hear my question. He smiled. Word spreads quickly when people keep solving impossible problems. I smiled awkwardly. I've never wanted attention. Sophia looked at me with a warm smile. Maybe not, but you've earned something much more important. I raised an eyebrow. What's that? She answered without hesitation. Respect. That single word stayed with me. For years, I had worked without recognition. Not because I wasn't capable, but because nobody wanted to see me. Now people respected my ideas. Not because they knew my past, but because they had seen my work. Later that evening, my phone rang. It was Emma. Hey, big brother. I smiled. Hey. She laughed. How was work today? I leaned back in my chair. Busy. She paused for a moment. Then she said, You sound different. I smiled. Doi. Yeah. You sound happy again. For the first time in months. I didn't deny it. I think I am. Emma laughed proudly. I told you your life wasn't over. I smiled as I looked out the office window. You were right. At that moment, I truly believed the hardest part of my life was behind me. I had no idea. One unexpected P. The next morning, my phone rang. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Then I answered. Hello. A calm voice replied. Is this Ethan? Yes. There was a brief pause. Then the man introduced himself. My name is Marcus Hill. I sat up straight. Victoria's finance director? He took a slow breath. Former finance director. His answer caught me off guard. Former. I resigned this morning. I frowned. Why? His voice became quieter. Because something is very wrong. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. I asked, What do you mean? He hesitated for a moment. Then he said, I can't explain this over the phone. Can we meet? An hour later, I walked into a quiet coffee shop. Marcus was already waiting. He looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. As soon as I sat down, he placed a thick envelope on the table. I looked at it. What's this? Marcus lowered his voice. Something I should have shown someone a long time ago. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside were financial statements, invoices, consulting contracts. At first, everything looked completely normal. Then one company name caught my attention. I checked another page, then another. My heartbeat became faster. I looked at Marcus. These companies don't exist. He nodded. I investigated every one of them. They're all fake. I turned another page. Millions of dollars have been transferred. My voice became serious. Who approved these payments? Marcus didn't hesitate. Ryan. I looked directly into his eyes. Does Victoria know? Marcus slowly shook his head. She trusted him completely. At that moment, I realized this wasn't a simple mistake. It was something much bigger. And for the first time since the divorce, I slowly closed the envelope. My hands felt heavier than before. Inside those papers was enough evidence to destroy Victoria's company. For a long moment, I didn't say a word. Marcus looked at me. What are you going to do? I stared at the documents. Part of me wanted to walk straight into Victoria's office. I wanted to throw the papers on her desk. I wanted her to finally see the truth. But another part of me wanted to walk away and let everything fall apart on its own. I looked at Marcus. I don't know. He nodded quietly. I understand. After leaving the coffee shop, I couldn't stop thinking. My heart was filled with anger. But my mind kept asking the same question. What kind of man do I want to become? That evening, I drove to visit Samuel Reed. He welcomed me with his usual calm smile. It's good to see you, Ethan. I sat down across from him. He looked at my face for a moment. Then he asked, Something is troubling you. I nodded. I found evidence that could destroy Victoria's company. Samuel remained silent. He simply listened. I continued. I could expose everything today. He looked at me. Then why haven't you? I took a deep breath. Because I don't know if I want justice. I lowered my eyes. Or revenge. The room became quiet. After a few seconds, Samuel finally spoke. Do you know the difference? I thought carefully before answering. Revenge satisfies anger. I paused. Justice protects the truth. A gentle smile appeared on Samuel's face. Exactly. Then he leaned forward. If you act only because you're angry, you'll slowly become the very person who hurt you. His words stayed with me. For the first time, I realized that winning wasn't about making someone suffer. It was about refusing to lose myself. Samuel's words stayed in my mind all night. Don't hide the truth, but don't use it like a weapon. The next morning, I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront Victoria. I wasn't going to call Ryan. And I wasn't going to seek revenge. Instead, I gathered every document Marcus had given me, every financial report, every fake consulting contract, every suspicious payment. Then I placed them into a new envelope. There was no letter inside, no threats, no accusations, only the truth. I addressed the package to one person, Olivia Grant, a business journalist known for exposing corruption. I quietly mailed the envelope. Then, I walked away. Days passed. At first, nothing happened. Then one morning, the headlines changed. Questions raised over missing company funds. Another news channel reported. Financial experts demand investigation. By the end of the week, the story was everywhere. Employees whispered in the hallways. Investors requested emergency meetings. Business analysts began asking difficult questions. I watched everything from my office, without saying a single word. Then Ryan appeared on television. He smiled confidently. The economy is challenging, he said, but our company remains stronger than ever. I quietly turned off the television. He could fool the cameras, but he couldn't hide the facts forever. For the first time since my divorce, I realized something important. I didn't need to destroy anyone. The truth was already doing that. As I looked out the office window, I smiled to myself. Life had taught me a lesson I would never forget. Karma doesn't always arrive with anger. It doesn't always arrive with revenge. Sometimes, it begins with one honest decision, one envelope, one piece of evidence, placed quietly on the right desk. And once the truth begged, the morning started with something I never expected. Applause. As I walked into the conference room, I stopped. Everyone was already standing. The entire executive team was clapping. For a moment, I honestly thought I had entered the wrong room. I looked at Daniel. "What's going on?" He smiled. "Well, are you just going to stand there?" A few people laughed. I looked around the room again. "Seriously, what is this?" Sophia stepped forward with a warm smile. "It's a thank you." I blinked. "For what?" Daniel walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. His voice became serious. "For reminding all of us that impossible problems always have solutions." I smiled awkwardly. "I only did my job." Daniel immediately shook his head. "No, Ethan, you did much more than that." The room became completely quiet. Daniel turned toward the entire team. Then he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Today we're announcing our new platform." He looked back at me, and none of it would exist without Ethan's strategy. I quickly interrupted him. "Daniel, you really don't have to do this." He smiled. "Yes, Ido." Then he faced everyone again. "For too many years, this man worked behind the scenes while other people received the credit." I felt my chest tighten. Daniel raised his voice one last time. "Today, that changes." The room exploded into applause once again. For years, I had worked in silence. Today, that silence was finally replaced with respect. And for the first time in a very long time, I truly felt seen. Later that afternoon, we walked onto the stage for the official product launch. The auditorium was packed. Reporters filled every seat. Television cameras pointed toward the stage. Bright lights shined from every direction. I stood quietly behind Daniel. He confidently introduced our new platform. The audience listened carefully. When he finished speaking, the room filled with applause. Then Daniel smiled. He looked toward the audience. "Before we answer any questions, I'd like everyone to meet the person who designed the strategy behind this entire project." He turned toward me. "Ethan, would you join me?" For a second, I froze. I had spent years avoiding the spotlight. Now, everyone was looking at me. Daniel smiled again. "Come on." I took a deep breath. Then I walked onto the stage. The audience welcomed me with another round of applause. I looked across the room. Dozens of cameras flashed at the same time. A reporter stood up and raised her hand. "Mr. Carter, how did you predict the market's response so accurately?" I smiled. My answer was simple. "I listened." The reporter looked surprised. "Listen to what?" I answered calmly. "Our customers." Most companies spend too much time trying to impress people. We spent our time understanding them. The room became completely quiet. Then I continued. "Customers usually tell us exactly what they need. We just have to stop talking long enough to hear them." Several reporters immediately began writing notes. Another journalist raised his hand. "Will you continue leading future projects?" Before I could answer, Daniel laughed. "I certainly hope so." The audience laughed with him. I smiled. For the first time in years, people weren't asking who Victoria's husband was. They were asking who Ethan Card. I held my phone tightly. "An emergency board meeting?" I asked. Marcus sighed. "Yes. Olivia's investigation has shaken everyone." I leaned back in my chair. "What happened?" Marcus answered quietly. "The board demanded explanations for the missing money." I stayed silent. Then I asked, "How did Victoria respond?" He let out a tired breath. "She blamed the media." I closed my eyes for a moment. "And Ryan?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "He told everyone the company would recover if they stayed united." I frowned. "Does Victoria still believe him?" There was a long pause. Then Marcus finally replied, "Completely." A few days later, Olivia published another article. This one was impossible to ignore. It included financial records, anonymous interviews, detailed timelines, and evidence that raised even more questions. The story spread everywhere. Television channels discussed it all day. Employees whispered in the hallways. Investors demanded independent audits. I watched the news without saying a word. Then, my phone vibrated. I looked at the screen. Asterisco Victoria. For a moment, I simply stared at her name. Months ago, I would have answered before the first ring ended. Now, I couldn't bring myself to touch the screen. The call ended. A minute later, she called again. I still didn't answer. Then another call, and another. Finally, a message appeared. Can we talk? I read those 3 words several times. Then I quietly locked my phone. Not because I hated her, but because I had finally started protecting the one person I had ignored for years. Myself. I held my phone tightly. An emergency board meeting? I asked. Marcus sighed. Yes. Olivia's investigation has shaken everyone. I leaned back in my chair. What happened? Marcus answered quietly. The board demanded explanations for the missing money. I stayed silent. Then I asked, how did Victoria respond? He let out a tired breath. She blamed the media. I closed my eyes for a moment. And Ryan? Marcus laughed bitterly. He told everyone the company would recover if they stayed united. I frowned. Does Victoria still believe him? There was a long pause. Then Marcus finally replied. Completely. A few days later, Olivia published another article. This one was impossible to ignore. It included financial records, anonymous interviews, detailed timelines, and evidence that raised even more questions. The story spread everywhere. Television channels discussed it all day. Employees whispered in the hallways. Investors demanded independent audits. I watched the news without saying a word. Then, my phone vibrated. I looked at the screen. Asterisco Victoria. For a moment, I simply stared at her name. Months ago, I would have answered before the first ring ended. Now, I couldn't bring myself to touch the screen. The call ended. A minute later, she called again. I still didn't answer. Then another call, and another. Finally, a message appeared. Can we talk? I read those 3 words several times. Then I quietly locked my phone. Not because I hated her, but because I had finally started protecting the one person I had ignored for years. Myself. I was reviewing a stack of reports when I heard a knock on my office door. Come in, I said. Daniel walked inside. One look at his face told me something was wrong. Ethan, he said quietly. I looked up. You look serious. He nodded. I am. Without another word, he placed his phone on my desk. You need to see this. I picked it up. A live news broadcast filled the screen. Government investigators were walking into Victoria's company headquarters. Police vehicles lined the entrance. Employees stood outside the building in complete silence. Television cameras captured every moment. The reporter spoke calmly. Authorities have launched a formal investigation following evidence of financial fraud and illegal financial transfers. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Months earlier, that company had been my home. Now it looked like a crime scene. Daniel pulled up a chair beside me. After a long silence, he finally asked, Did you expect this? I took a slow breath. I knew the truth would eventually come out. I paused, but I never imagined it would happen like this. Just then, Sophia entered the office. She looked at both of us before speaking. The investigators have already frozen several company accounts. The room became quiet again. Daniel looked at me. His voice was calm. How are you feeling? I thought about the question for several seconds. Then I answered honestly. I don't know. I looked back at the television. I thought I would feel satisfied. I slowly shook my head. But I don't. Watching everything collapse didn't feel like victory. It only reminded me of everything we had once built together. Hello. For several long seconds, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than any argument we had ever shared. Finally, I heard her voice. Soft, weak, almost unrecognizable. Ethan. I closed my eyes for a moment. Yes. She took a slow, shaky breath. I need to see you. I looked out the window. There was nothing I could fix anymore. Nothing I could save. My voice remained calm. There isn't anything I can do. She answered quietly. I know. Another silence followed. Then she whispered, Please. There was something different about her. The confidence that once filled every room was gone. The woman who had proudly told me I was holding her back now sounded completely broken. I finally spoke. One meeting. I paused. That's all. She allowed a quiet breath. Thank you. The next morning, we met in a quiet park. It was early. The benches were almost empty. When I saw Victoria walking toward me, I barely recognized her. Her shoulders were slumped. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. The confident CEO the world admired had disappeared. She sat down across from me. For several moments, she couldn't even look at me. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know where to begin." I looked at her calmly. "You don't have to." She slowly shook her head. "No, Ido." She looked down at her trembling hands. Then she quietly admitted, "I trusted Ryan." I nodded. "I know. I signed documents without reading everything." Again, I answered softly, "I know." Tears filled her eyes. I thought he was helping me. For the first time, I saw genuine regret in her face. But deep inside, I also knew that some mistakes change lives forever. Victoria lowered her head. Tears slowly rolled down her face. Her voice trembled. "He stole everything." I looked at her quietly. "I know." She quickly shook her head. "No, you don't understand." I stayed silent. She took a deep breath. "I lost the company. I lost my reputation. I lost the people who believed in me." I listened without interrupting. Then I answered calmly, "You lost those things." I paused. "But they weren't the first things you lost." She slowly looked up at me. Confusion filled her eyes. "What do you mean?" I met her gaze. "You lost us. Long before you lost your business." The words hit her harder than I expected. She closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I know." After a long silence, she finally spoke again. "I spent years chasing bigger offices, bigger investors, bigger headlines." She gave a painful smile. "I thought success made me valuable." I remained quiet. She continued, "I confused public success with personal worth. I believed standing beside powerful people would make me stronger." She slowly looked into my eyes. I was wrong. Neither of us spoke. The wind gently moved the trees around us. Then she whispered something that broke my heart. "You were always protecting me." My chest tightened. She continued, "You solved every crisis. You carried every burden. You celebrated every victory without asking for credit." Her voice cracked. "And I treated you like you were ordinary." I looked away. Those words were everything I had wanted to hear. But hearing them now only reminded me of everything we had already lost. Some apologies arrive only after there's nothing left to save. The courthouse was quieter than I expected. As I walked through the front entrance, camera flashes lit up the hallway. Reporters crowded around me from every direction. One of them called out loudly, "Mr. Carter, do you have a statement?" I kept walking. There was nothing left to say. The truth no longer needed my words. It was about to speak for itself. Inside the courtroom, I found a seat near the back. Emma was already waiting. She smiled gently as I sat beside her. She looked at my face for a moment. Then she quietly asked, "Are you okay?" I stared toward the front of the courtroom. "I honestly don't know." She reached over and lightly squeezed my hand. "You don't have to be strong today." I nodded. "I know." A few moments later, the courtroom doors opened. Everyone stood. Judge Eleanor Ross entered the room. She took her seat and looked around the courtroom. Her voice was calm and firm. "You may be seated." The room became completely silent. Government attorneys walked to the front. One by one, they presented financial records. Large screens displayed bank transfers, fake consulting contracts, hidden accounts. Every new document revealed another piece of the truth. And every piece pointed toward the same man, Ryan. As I watched the evidence appear on the screen, I realized something. No lie can survive forever when the truth finally has a chance to speak. The courtroom remained silent. Every eye was fixed on the witness stand. One by one, former employees walked forward and took the oath. The first witness looked nervous. He adjusted the microphone and took a deep breath. "I warned management about the payments," he said. "The numbers didn't make sense." The government attorney nodded. "What happened after you reported your concerns?" He lowered his eyes. "I was told to stay quiet." Another witness stepped forward. She held several documents in her hands. "These consulting companies didn't exist," she explained. "I asked for verification, but my request was ignored." The attorney asked, "Who approved the payments?" She answered without hesitation. "Ryan handled every transfer." The courtroom grew even quieter. Each witness revealed another hidden piece of the story. Every testimony matched the financial records. Every document pointed to the same fraud. Then, my eyes slowly turned toward Victoria. She sat alone at the defense table. The confident CEO I once knew was gone. Her lawyers barely spoke. There was almost nothing left to defend. After a long pause, Judge Eleanor Ross looked at Victoria. Ms. Victoria Carter, do you wish to respond? Victoria slowly stood. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then, with tears in her eyes, she finally said, yes. The entire courtroom waited. She took a deep breath. I ignored the warnings. I trusted the wrong person. I signed documents without reading them carefully. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. Those decisions were mine. She looked directly at the judge, then quietly said the words no one expected. I accept responsibility. No excuses. No blame. Only regret. At that moment, I realized the empire we had once dreamed of building had already fallen. The courtroom became completely silent after Victoria's confession. No one spoke. No one moved. For a few moments, the only sound was the scratching of reporters' pens. Then the hearing came to an end. People slowly stood and walked outside. Within minutes, the news spread across every television channel. Investors withdraw support. Banks refuse additional financing. Company faces bankruptcy. I watched the headlines appear one after another. The company that Victoria and I had built from nothing was collapsing in front of the entire world. A few days later, the final announcement came. The company had officially filed for bankruptcy. I stared at the news for a long time. I expected to feel relieved. Instead, I felt empty. That evening, Emma found me sitting alone on a park bench. She quietly sat beside me. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she asked, "How do you feel?" I thought carefully before answering. I expected to feel victorious. Emma looked at me, and I slowly shook my head. "I don't." She waited. Then I whispered, "I only feel sad." Emma nodded gently. She understood. "That's because you loved more than the company." I looked down at my hands. "I love the dream." She smiled sadly. "And dreams hurt when they die." Her words stayed with me. As I looked toward the city skyline, I realized I wasn't mourning a business. I was mourning the life I once believed would last forever. For months, I had imagined this moment. I pictured the company collapsing. I imagined Victoria losing everything. I thought revenge would finally bring me peace. But sitting beside Emma on that quiet park bench, I realized how wrong I had been. The only thing I felt was sadness. Images from the past filled my mind. Our first tiny office, the cheap coffee we drank every night, the long hours, the impossible dreams. Back then, we didn't have money. We didn't have powerful investors. All we had was each other. Emma looked at me and quietly asked, "Do you know what real healing looks like?" I looked at her. I thought I did. She smiled gently. "Healing isn't watching someone lose everything." I remained silent. Then she continued, "Healing begins when you stop letting their choices decide who you become." I lowered my head. Her words reached a place inside me that anger never could. I took a slow breath. I wanted revenge. Emma nodded. "I know, but revenge keeps you chained to the past." I looked at her. "Then what should I choose?" She smiled warmly. "Choose yourself." She paused. "Choose peace." Then she softly added, "Choose the future." I closed my eyes for a moment. For the first time in a long time, I felt something inside me begin to heal. Not because justice had been served, not because anyone had failed, but because I was finally ready to stop carrying yesterday into tomorrow.